All right, so today we have natural law theory. And you could have many different versions of natural law theory, so I want to make it really clear which one I'm talking about. Natural law theory could go all the way back to like the Stoics in the 3rd century BCE. And their idea was kind of like the logos or the cosmic consciousness determined everything. But we still had free will. But our free will wasn't in our circumstances or life choices. It was how we responded to the things that were happening to us. So we have an internal free will of how we'll respond to determined external circumstances, if that makes sense. They use the analogy of fate or destiny was like a cosmic cart going through the universe, and you're tethered to the back of this cosmic cart of fate or destiny. Now, we don't have the strength to loose ourselves from our fate or that cosmic cart, but we do have the choice of either skipping along merrily behind or being drugged like a dog. So your choice is how you're going to deal with the fate that has been assigned you, not that you can change your fate. That was the Stoic version. The Taoist in ancient China, and even to this day, had this word called the Tao, T-A-O, Tao. And it can be translated as the way, but it's like the logos. It means so much more than just the way. It's like the right path, the way of nature, the way things are destined or meant to be. And so devotees or follower of the Tao would be followers of the way, and they would be trying to align themselves with the ways of nature, natural law. We could also have like a Darwinian natural law theory, but this one would be quite frightening if you try to apply evolutionary principles like natural selection, adaptation, mutation, and the cliche survival of the fittest. If you applied that to human ethics, it would be kind of like eat or be eaten, the strong dominate the weak, find a way to adapt or die, eat or be eaten, that sort of concept. The one we're going to be talking about, however, it's an interesting hybrid. And Orlando raised this question at the end of last class, like, oh, this would be really interesting if you could maybe take Aristotle and apply him to another theory like divine command theory. And that's exactly what Thomas Aquinas did in the 12th and 13th century. After the Crusades, the lost works of Aristotle were found in Islamic libraries, like in the Alhambra in Spain. And they had been translated from the Greek into Arabic with commentary. And so when the Crusaders came in and these works were rediscovered, they had been lost to the West. All we had was Aristotle's logic. We didn't have his other writings like on ethics. And they were translated back into the Latin, or not back into Latin, but then into the Latin so it could be disseminated through Europe and understood by the church and people that were educating at that time. Well, Thomas Aquinas was a scholar, philosopher, priest living in, I believe, Paris. And when he got a hold of the writings of Aristotle, it kind of revolutionized his mind. And earlier, we had St. Augustine doing very similar things with Plato, and we had like this Platonic, Neoplatonic Christian hybrid going through the medieval period. But by the time we get after the Crusades into Aquinas, we have Aristotle now being kind of like baptized into the Christian faith. Almost, even though both he and Plato were pagan Greeks, they had so much insight and wisdom that many Christians try to incorporate their knowledge and teaching into Christian theology. And Thomas Aquinas did this with the writings and thinking of Aristotle. And so we have this belief. So in this type of divine command theory, this type of natural law theory by Thomas Aquinas, we have divine law. This is the highest law and it comes from God. And this would be similar to divine command theory. And this applies to the entire universe. But under this universal divine law, we have natural law, things that apply to created beings here on this earth. But once again, this is in a theistic, not a materialistic context. Natural laws are an outflow from God, the universal divine laws, natural laws, and then below that we have human laws. And so this is the category in here, in between universal divine laws and human laws. Natural law theory is this in-between place, and that's what I'm going to roll out for you today via St. Thomas Aquinas. So he's using divine command theory plus human reason. So this is our first hybrid theory, divine command plus human reason. So it's going to have the same critique issues that divine command theory will have, but it will also have to deal with the critique of reason-based theories. Thomas Aquinas, by observing the world and having a keen understanding of scriptures and the church fathers, believed we had 4 rights. Now, these aren't just rights in the sense of privileges, things that we're allowed to do, but they're also like duties, things we're expected to do. And I'll roll these out for you slowly and then define them. The first right is the right of self-preservation. Everyone has the right to preserve their own life. Secondly, everyone has the right to procreate. Someone else is not allowed to take your right to procreate from you. That is a natural right given by God. But once again, it's not just a right, it's also a duty. It's something you're supposed to do if you're able. Thirdly, education. We are made with a desire to know, to learn, to grow. He's not talking about like free government education, but he's talking about human beings should not be kept from knowledge. We shouldn't put someone in a box. We shouldn't put someone in a closet. We shouldn't keep people ignorant, but we should allow them to explore and to learn and to grow. Education is a natural right and duty. You shouldn't just be content being stagnant and saying, well, whatever. You should pursue things. You should try to develop your mind, your reason, your understanding of God's world and of God himself. And then fourth right is socialization. Humans were made as social creatures, and you're not allowed to take away the sociability of others. Okay. So those are the 4 rights or / duties. Now, I've talked to different Aquinas scholars, and I don't see a hierarchy in them. Now, obviously, if you don't have self-preservation, you're not going to have the other 3, because if you're dead, you can't procreate, educate, or socialize. So I would see self-preservation as kind of primary, but they kind of all seem sort of even to me. Like these are 4 even rights, and they all need to be respected and also fulfilled because they're also duties. Now, sometimes we might have natural rights or duties in conflict. For example, your right or duty to procreate might affect your self-preservation. So for example, if a woman is told, if you have another child, there's a really strong chance it's going to kill you. Well, she's now having a conflict between 2 of these rights duties. One is she has a duty and right to protect her own life, but she also has this right or duty to procreate. But if procreation is going to kill her, what is she supposed to do? And so Thomas Aquinas came up with 2 qualifiers in case there's a conflict between the 4 rights. The first qualifier is called forfeiture, and it's just like it sounds. If someone violates or attempts to take away one of your rights, they forfeit their right, the equivalent right that they are trying to take from you. Same scenario. If you jeopardize or forfeit someone else's right, you forfeit that right yourself. So, for example, if someone was messing around and they ended up hitting their buddy in the beanbag with a bat or golf club, and they ended up becoming sterile from it, and they couldn't have children. Well, that person, even if they didn't intend to sterilize their friend messing around, they have to be castrated or sterilized as well, because they have now forfeited their right to having children because they took that right away from someone else. Intentional or unintentional, it doesn't matter, because you still took away someone else's right to procreate. If you were playing with some friends, and you thought it would be funny to drop a brick off a building on to your buddy's head, and it ended up making him have mental disabilities. Well, you're going to get a brick or something equivalent dropped on your head because you have now forfeited your right to get to be educated because of what you did to somebody else. So it's very much a tit for tat, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, blow for blow. This is the law. This is, you pay the equivalent to what you violated. Now, let's take a different example. Say, God forbid, someone gets raped. Well, they haven't taken away their right to life, their right to procreate, or their right to educate. What they've probably affected is that person's right to socialize. Because they've been violated, that victim may now be afraid to go out at night, or to be in certain venues, or be around certain genders or certain types of people. So the appropriate punishment isn't to kill the rapist, or to castrate them, or to give them brain damage, but it's to take away their ability to socialize, because that's what they've done to another. So the appropriate response would be to incarcerate them and keep them from being able to socialize with others, because they've taken that ability away from someone else because of their abuse or victimization of them. All right, hopefully that's clear. The second qualifier is a little more confusing, and this is called double effect. And I will say this one slowly. Double effect says, if in order to do good, an unintended, this is super important, unintended evil is also accomplished, you may proceed if it's a serious enough situation. All right, let me say that one more time. If in order to do good, an unintended evil is also accomplished, you may proceed if it's a serious enough situation. And I don't know why, but pregnancy scenarios work really well to explain double effect. So say a woman goes into her doctor and he says, I got some good news, some bad news, and some good news. And she's like, well, what's the good news? And he goes, you're pregnant. And she goes, well, what's the bad news? He said, you have a really aggressive form of cancer that's going to kill you and your unborn child before you can deliver it. And she said, well, then what's the good news? He said, there's a treatment for the cancer. Oh, there's one more bad news. And the final bad news is, but the treatment would end up terminating your pregnancy. So if we plug this into the double effect formula, this is very much a rational, like doing math kind of formula. So we ask, if in order to do good, the good would be to save her own life from cancer, an unintended evil, that would be the termination of her pregnancy. She wants the baby, she doesn't want to abort it, and she's not intentionally aborting it. It's simply a side effect of the medicine, has the unintended side effect of killing her child. She may proceed because it's a serious enough situation. Does that make sense? It's very logical, very rational. Now, let me give you another scenario where it wouldn't work, or you can tell me if it would work or not. Say we have some young teenage expectant mother, and she really wants to go to her high school prom, but she has this debilitating acne, and she doesn't even feel comfortable going out because she just feels grotesque. So she's in talking to her dermatologist, and he says, wonderful news. We have this medicine called Accutane that could actually have you cleared up by the time of the prom. The downside is, if you're pregnant or expecting to be pregnant, you can't take this medicine because it could cause permanent deformities and birth defects to your child. Okay. Can she take Accutane? Well, if you plug it into the double effect, what she's trying to do is to socialize. In order to socialize, she can take this medicine that will allow that to be possible, but an unintended side effect is it would abort or deform her unborn child. May she proceed? Anybody?
No, because the unborn child is a greater good than socializing.
Correct. So her one evening of being able to socialize at the prom does not justify a lifetime of having a child that's deformed and is going to have to deal with socialization with a deformed body because she wanted to have clear skin for an evening. And so it is not justified because it's not a serious enough situation. One last scenario, and I'll let this one go. Say a woman goes in and she finds out she's pregnant, but this time it's a tubal pregnancy. Okay, so the intention is to save her life. The way to save her life is to remove the zygote that is embedded in her fallopian tubes. But now you can't proceed because you are intentionally taking a life to save a life. It's not like you're taking a medicine and the unintended consequence is it's going to terminate your pregnancy. Now the means to an end of saving the mother is to kill the child. And that is not allowed in natural law theory. And to be fair to Thomas Aquinas, he's writing this in the 12th, 13th century. And if you had a tubal pregnancy, either the woman's going to die or miscarriage, or God's going to perform a miracle. But people weren't going in and doing surgeries of that kind of nature. So maybe if Thomas Aquinas was living today, he'd have a third category of qualifiers for cases like that. But it's amazing how well this theory works, and you can plug it in to so many situations. I mean, whether you want to talk about abortion or euthanasia or war or capital punishment or mask wearing, any of those things we could plug into natural law theory. Any questions or comments? I'm going to go ahead and stop this and we'll dialogue about it a little bit. Thomas Aquinas, divine command theory plus human reason, 4 rights, self-preservation, procreation, education, socialization, and then 2 qualifiers, forfeiture and double effect. If in order to do good, an unintended evil also arises, you may proceed if it's a serious enough situation. And that's Aquinas' natural law theory in 15.